It's the 2nd of January, and it's that time again, folks. Let's make some bold predictions for 2026. But unlike Lawrence Barretto, I can do better than 5. I can give you 15. But first, let's quickly recap the ones I made last year and see how I did. And if you'd rather skip to the good part and the bold predictions for this year, you can check out this timestamp here or just go to the next chapter. Either way, I don't mind, I'll wait, or not. First off, Kimi Antonelli would beat Liam Lawson. Yeah. He was 7th in the championship, Kimi, whereas Liam was 14th. Then I predicted Esteban Ocon would get Haas's first ever podium. No, the best he could do was 5th. In fact, Oliver Behrman got closer than Esteban did when he got 4th in Mexico. Then there was on-track contact between Piastri and Norris. Yes, and it resulted in DNF, definitely in Canada and in Austin. Then I pegged Williams to be getting a podium on merit, and absolutely they did! They actually were so nice, they did it twice. I was so proud in getting that prediction right, and I even suggested that Baku would be a turning point one for Williams too. Then I thought that Lindblad would be getting his Formula 1 promotion in 2025, and it's a technical no, because he did get a promotion to Formula 1, but it's for this coming year. But it was announced last year, but it doesn't really count fully in my eyes. Then I had Alpine being rebadged as High-Tech Grand Prix. No. But I still swear that that was the plan until the Oaks family had to turn tail and run away from the law. Then there was Mercedes beating Red Bull in the Constructors. Yep, Mercedes were 2nd, Red Bull were 3rd. Lance Stroll crashing out on camera. I would say, sorta, was in the Canadian press conference after the rumours of his injuries being exacerbated in Spain. He was just like, yeah, I know, I'm here. I got injured, yeah, whatever. Then there's the one that I think was the biggest clanger, that Lewis Hamilton would win 4 times in 2025. Oh, God, no. Then there was Verstappen finishing out of the points. No, he still finished in the top 10 in Grand Prix, but he did come close with that 10th thanks to a penalty in Spain and then 9th in Hungary. Then 11 was Sauber would drop stake sponsorship before the end of the year. Nope, that didn't happen, but they are now Audi. Then there was Doohan being dropped even earlier than Miami, and no, Miami was the final race for him. The Aston Max rumours intensifying? Sort of, just reached that similar peak and then just dissipated. McLaren team leaders clashing, Andrea and Zach? Nope, they held the line publicly. And then I had Liam Lawson getting a multi-year extension, and no, he did get an extension, but it was only for 1 year. Admittedly, that wasn't as good as 2025, but you know what, I had some really good ones, and the ones I didn't get right, they weren't that far off. Either way, we're going to talk about this year's predictions. Subscribe to the channel to be sure that you'll watch the video next year when I see how wrong I was about this year. My first bold prediction is that Verstappen will stay with Red Bull for 2027. Making his intentions clear before the European leg finishes. Now, this may sound boring to you and going against the grain about what everyone else thinks and is sort of wanting to happen. We gotta remember what season we're going into here. 2026 is a complete reset where nobody knows where everyone else is going to be. It's a lot more comfortable to remain where you are than having to just up 6 and go somewhere else and there being no guarantees it'll be better. And we all assume that Red Bull's going to be absolutely terrible, but I really don't think they will be, especially with all of the news that we've heard in the last few weeks about innovations with the power unit that are on par with Mercedes, which shows that in a cost cap era, what Red Bull powertrains are able to do is actually pretty nifty. Red Bull and Ford could actually nail the basic concept, and even if the engine's not the best, if it's a really solid framework with potential for a really good upside and continuous development that really appeals to Max, that might convince him to stay. Couple that with Ford's push for drivability, this is a really good sign for Verstappen. We will get the news that he will be staying with Red Bull, that he will silence the chatter about where he's going to go for 2027 relatively early on. He won't be leaving it until after next season, round about the time of the summer break. We'll get some sort of information dump as to whether or not he'll be going to Mercedes or not, and then Toto will have to just think about what he's going to do next and realise, yes sir, George, Kimi, we'll just give you all the contract extensions. It'll turn a slow burn rumour into a decisive storyline. And Max is famously allergic to drama anyway that wastes weekends, and I think he would like to dedicate himself to the project coherently and maturely with honest dialogue throughout. So the simplest thing to do in that situation is just let everyone else scramble. And the GT3 freedom that Red Bull has given him to work with Mercedes is a very useful venting mechanism. Then, the second one, is Williams winning a Grand Prix on merit and taking at least 1 pole position, again on merit. I really like that idea about things being on merit that I used last year, so I'm just going to go with it again, but this time it's for an even grander prize. Because, like I mentioned with Red Bull, the 2026 rules reset could easily be a great opportunity for a midfield team to rise up to the big leagues and maybe knock a couple of them off their perch. And Williams, as well as I think Aston Martin, stand to be the two most likely candidates for that role. Or at the very least, just get closer than they were in 2025, when there was around about a 250 or 300 point gap between 5th and 4th. And with a driver pairing which is really apolitical and has actually been able to make the most of the chaos and the growing pains that we have seen from Williams in 2025. Sainz and Albon, that's a really hot ticket right there. They've proven to be magical when it really matters, and securing a pole position I think would be a major boost and a turning point for that Williams development and the return to the top. Even if it doesn't turn up with a win, being on pole in Q3, and deservedly so, instead of there being chaos like there was arguably in Baku thanks to the unpredictable weather conditions and all of the jeopardy there, that will really be a vote of confidence. And if Williams get one weekend with their low drag mode usage and tyre warm-up are perfect, a win becomes very real too. And especially if the strategy turns out to be a bit of a banger too, and that Carlos is able to just run his mouth off like he has done in 2025. Then my third prediction is that one McLaren driver will confirm to be leaving the team before their expected contract end, and it'll be announced before the end of 2026 to boot. McLaren are one of those rare forms that they can claim to have two #1 drivers and then point to 2025 and say, look at that, we were able to contain them and they were happy, really happy, right? Well, I still remember what Lando said in the Abu Dhabi presser, that, yeah, he and Oscar get along just fine, but it's very tenuous in that one big bust-up could see the whole house of cards collapse between them. And of course, 2025 saw a lot of sloppy mechanisms regarding trying to make things fair. We even get the likes of Martin Brundle pointing out there may have been subconscious but unintentional bias toward Lando Norris, as in they were trying to be fair, but just the seniority and the presence of Lando just won out, so McLaren have certainly got a lot of things to learn in that regard. But there is the matter of their contracts. I think one major tell will be is if we never hear at all next year about the future of Lando's contract, because Zach and Andrea, they like to get contract extensions in early. They have done that with Lando, especially on repeat. And if next year starts with one driver clearly ahead, or the team's performance drops to similar levels of 22, with both of them getting itchy or feeling glum, the pressure to move early gets intense. I added that this could play out before the end of the year, as it's a nice little constraint, and a bit of a challenge for me, because it forces a proper public break rather than endless paddock guesswork. You all talk about Oscar Piastri being the likely person to break rank and leave McLaren, but as I pointed out in my video yesterday, which was quite divisive, I would suspect that if it got to a point where Lando wasn't contesting a championship and he wasn't having a good time, he could be the one to leave the team. And I'm not saying to another team, and clearly many of you don't based on the poll I carried out, but I think he could easily consider retirement in a Jody Scheckter-like manner. Because right now, Norris isn't beholden to anyone. Not his parents, not Zach Brown, not McLaren, not anyone other than his own wants and needs. So again, let's just see what happens regarding contract extensions. If we don't hear anything around the time of the British Grand Prix, I will be very interested, and I'll be getting my foam out for that. Number 4, Cadillac score a podium in their debut season. A debut podium for Cadillac is exactly the kind of thing a new reg year can cough up. And they're not some podunk outfit. I'm really impressed with what General Motors been up to in simulating Grand Prix weekends. And with them being a Ferrari customer and having a driver lineup that is one of the most senior on the grids, who's seen everything that F1's had to throw at them, this could be a really interesting situation. And not to mention that Checo and Valtteri have the most loyal fan base I have ever seen in the sport. They are really devoted to their drivers, and Cadillac, in that sense, in terms of delivering goodwill amongst seasoned F1 fans, they really delivered. And considering that Cadillac / Andretti have had plenty of time of getting themselves bedded in with Formula 1 and looking toward 2026, they could stand to really gain if all of the other teams who had 25 campaigns to deal with are tripping over themselves in various degrees, be it with the engine, be it with the active aero, or what have you, or maybe even driver drama. Then maybe Checo and Valtteri, keen to really prove themselves that they have still got it, and to really make Cadillac feel like they back the right horses, and a podium finish, it doesn't require them to be one of the best 3 teams on the grid. It just needs the right kind of circumstances on the Sunday. And a little bit of a side quest, I'd say they score at least 25 points. 15 for third, that would certainly be giving them a really good boost toward that goal. It'd be more points than Alpine scored last year, which was 23, the best worst team. 5th is Franco Colapinto ending this year with a confirmed race seat for next year. Now, you may not care about this one, what Franco Colapinto's destiny is all about, but I care about it, damn it! Franco's one of my boys now, here I said it. I seriously suspect his prior knowledge of Mercedes workflows and engines with his time at Williams will serve him well, give him an early advantage over Pierre Gasly, who's never touched a Mercedes power unit in his entire Formula One career. Also, when teams are unsure about the pecking order, they'll want to hedge their bets by locking in drivers who show adaptability. And so far, in my opinion, after a bit of a shaky start at Imola, I think Franco and Flavio have really gotten on and managed to reach the same wavelength. They're on the same page. Flavio probably looking at the kid and realizing that that kid's got balls. He's willing to defy things and think like a true racer, and that was all punctuated by that moment in Austin when he thought that Pierre was so slow, and then just did it for 17th. He was fighting tooth and nail for 17th. Imagine how much he would care if it was 7th, or even 1st. I do suspect that he's actually been able to rise to the occasion against Flavio, whereas the likes of Jack Doohan, as we have seen, both in Formula 1 and in Super Formula, if you hear all the rumours about trying to actually get to the Suzuka track for the test, Briatore being resistant, I think Doohan is very much cracked under Briatore. In fact, if you look at what Jack's socials are up to, he's probably not even affiliated with Alpine anymore. Or maybe even Flavio's management. Do you think that if Franco does step up and he gives Pierre a little bit of a spook in a good way to fire them both up and they can be within the midfield again in year one, that might give him the seat for next year? He'll either exceed expectations or show that he's a safe pair of hands as they bed themselves in with Mercedes. And I do suspect that we will be seeing quite a few more Franco Colapintos this year. And then number 6 is that Fernando will win twice next year, because we all talk about win number 33, why aren't we talking about win number 34? And as an added bonus, I'm pretty sure we will get a repeat of, my name is Fernando Alonso, and I'm here to stay. Alonso winning twice is the kind of prediction that may sound a little bit heady, until you remember how regulation changes can resurrect teams with the right technical leadership. Aston, oh, they have been built for this year, for ages, and right now, you could easily call them a super team. It's a very credible notion. Except one obvious facet, but we'll get to them in a moment, folks. He's next. Not to mention that Fernando will be driving an Adrian Newey-designed car for the first time in his 25-year career. And that is going to give him all the motivation that he needs, because look at what he was able to do in 2025, when, understandably, that car was absolutely terrible. And I know that many of you are going to pointing out what Fernando said earlier in the year, that if the car is good, I'll call it a day. If it's not, I'll continue, because I want to end my career on a good note. Well, it wouldn't surprise me at all that the wily old fox decides to forget he said that, because I think he will be hanging around for the sake of history and building a legacy with Aston Martin, not just for the vibes of hey, I'm driving an Adrian Newey car, yeah, that's great. No, he'll want to really stamp his mark on Aston Martin and say, I have been a very key driver, much more so than even the boss's son. And yes, a third title would be nice, but it is a little bit fanciful. But I think adding a couple of extra wins to take his win tally above 32, maybe a little bit closer to 40, just a little bit closer to his actual age, that's perfectly reasonable. So okay, let's go into the Lance one, because I think this one's a doozy. That he will step away mid-season, forcing Aston to make a hasty call. A lot of folks are maybe thinking Lance will call time after next year, but a mid-season exit? I think could be a headline here. Next year is going to be the Canadian's most intense year to date to prove himself. A driver who's been around Formula 1 for nearly a decade at this point, one of the most experienced drivers on the grid at the moment, and he's not really done enough to justify that long of a tenure other than his familial connections, which, I must point out to you, are not nearly as strong as they were. Certainly not as strong as they were when the team was Racing Point in 2019 when they saved Team Silverstone from bankruptcy. And the replacement twist is what backs this prediction, because I think they might actually do a little bit of a curveball here, if they're not willing to actually promote from within. They've got the infrastructure now and the ambition, especially from Honda, to treat next year as a title opportunity. So if one seat becomes the weak link, they'll be under enormous internal pressure to act quickly, despite Papa Stroll probably pushing back for obvious reasons. Then you recruit Jack Crawford as a perfectly reasonable stopgap option in case Lance decide to abandon ship hastily. I mean, it'd certainly be nice for the American audiences if at least he's there, Jack, for one of the American Grand Prix. But I certainly think that if Honda senses an opportunity to assert their own claim to this team, maybe they might actually decide to do something and work with Red Bull to bring back Yuki Tsunoda, albeit just to cover themselves for the rest of 2026. 2027, that might be harder to justify for, reasons I'll get to in a future prediction. So just hang in there. It could be a deal similar to the one that Red Bull penned with Williams and Alex Albon for 2022. But like that deal, I could imagine there'll be some IP security conditions. That'll be a really real prospect. So it'd be a deal with strings attached, or Tsunoda wouldn't be allowed to talk to Aston Martin regarding Red Bull Intel, especially if the two teams end up being championship or constructor rival. But I do think that Honda and Laurent Mekies will be keen to try and establish Yuki Tsunoda back on the grid to maybe further his chances of remaining on the grid for even longer. Give him an audience with a team that isn't Red Bull, who is not dogged by the second seat curse, and then just see what happens. And hey, Yuki is an admirer of Fernando Alonso. Then at number 8, I've got Isaac Hadjar winning his first Grand Prix at Red Bull Racing. And this may sound a bit bold to you, considering about the meat grinder of Red Bull Racing, but I certainly don't think it's ridiculous. I know that there'll be people thinking he'll be out of F1 entirely or sent packing back to V-Carb for next year, but the two main cutthroats of the squad, Horner and Marco, they're not there anymore. Instead, we've got a more rational and engineering-focused lead practitioner in charge, with a more corporate overlord back in Austria. So he'll have more time to learn, and he might reward them with a standout performance. One weekend where he actually does well in qualifying, he keeps the tyres alive, and therefore he's able to convert and make use of what goes on around him, which we saw at the likes of the Dutch Grand Prix. He qualified up in the top 4, hung around, and then eventually got on the podium. So who's to say he might just go 2 positions higher in a Red Bull Racing car? And also, I doubt that the team will be doing anything silly or making too many mistakes, like they did with Yuki Tsunoda, often apologising for either them putting him out on the track too late and he then goes out in Q1, or they made a setup mistake, or what have you, something administrative or operative. Basically, the team made it harder for the Japanese driver to justify his very existence, which has probably gone some way as to why he has remained as their reserve. You know, that at least Lauren gets that they made a mistake, so they shouldn't put all the accountability on the driver. So I do imagine the ship will be that little bit tighter. They'll have learnt many things from 2025, and Hadjar will be the one to profit from it the most. Then I've got Audi taking a podium before the European leg ends, and finishing the year with at least 2 of them. Them actually doing this before the Madrid Grand Prix, as well as having 2 overall, this is a bit of a serious and spicy benchmark. And it helps that Sauber already achieved half of that the year before. I do think they'll start off with a really solid platform, and then consistently build from there. I seriously believe in Mattia Binotto and Jonathan Wheatley, who have both shown to be really dab hands when it comes to engineering and then sporting regulation comprehension, respectively. And they've got a driver pairing who absolutely adore each other. They have learnt so much from one another. Nico probably feels the youngest he has in over a decade, and Gabriel Bortoleto, well, he's turning into a bit of a quali merchant, right up there with Hulkenberg, who is known for being really good at qualifying. So I really think that that team is in good hands with these drivers, and it really wouldn't surprise me, a little bit of a side prediction, that we'll get a contract extension of Nico signing on for 1 more year through 2028. So I think them matching their tally of podiums before we get to the main Spanish Grand Prix is perfectly reasonable. And then come the end of the season, if development proves to be good, then they could easily add another one. Either through Gabi getting his first podium, or Nico just grabbing another one, or both of them. It really doesn't matter. The point is, though, is that Audi will be establishing themselves and making good on the progress that Sauber made in terms of operations and developing upgrades. So I do think Audi will be building for the future. I don't think they'll be contesting for wins consistently. Number 10, Mercedes have a team order moment that directly costs them a major result, maybe even a win. And the safe part of this prediction is that, if you think about it, it already happened. Because there had been some moments, especially in the back end of last season, when Kimi had suddenly recovered after his disastrous European leg. There have been moments when Kimi has been ahead of George, and then George rails against the system so hard to get his way. If there's a situation where Mercedes, as expected, are going to be the front runners, where both of them could be in contention for wins or maybe the title, both of them, there could be a situation where there might be something going on, and then one driver will be disappointed, or maybe just flat out rejected, ignored, stonewall, what have you, and it may not necessarily be Kimi who has to bend the knee. And also, it's going to be really stressing out the driver, because in this modern day of Formula 1, all drivers are brands in their own right, so this will very much affect their general public image. And therefore, it does make me think we will get some kind of a bust-up and a little bit of a dramarette, which will get Toto Wolff involved, and very much slapping them both down, not taking any nonsense from either of them. He'll have learnt from the days of Rosberg and Hamilton. I do think he'll be reigning with an iron fist. He'll be wanting to stamp this out quickly. Next, Oliver Behrman gets the Ferrari call-up for next year, but it's not Lewis he replaces. Wait, what do you mean by that, Law? You're talking about Charles? Well, hear me out. Why I think this could easily happen is that Ferrari has a soft spot of developing employment from within, and Oliver Behrman is very much one of their own. He is impressed at Haas, outscoring Ocon in a Ferrari-powered car, so it does make me think if he has a really good year in 2026, he could get the call-up to replace one of the current crop. And everyone's thinking, well, Lewis Hamilton's going to be the one that's retiring, and therefore Ollie will step in, and if then Charles goes due to the rumours about Aston Martin courting him, then Rafa Kamara, another Ferrari Academy driver, will then take his place. But I don't think that might be the case. I'm going on a bit of a limb here and getting the spanner out, and that maybe Lewis might make use of the fact if he knows that Charles Leclerc is not happy and is looking somewhere else, there could be an opportunity to influence this team even more. I think he will sense that this could be a chance to lead development and actually be taken seriously and more regularly. And with a fellow Briton Oliver next to him, it could be a really friendly partnership. Next, one race weekend will feature an innovation from a team that gets effectively banned between practice and Q1. You know, a design innovation at the beginning of a brand new regulation cycle, which looks impressive, it gets them performance, but then all the other teams come together, or the FIA looks at it itself and realizes, nah, I don't like that. It'll either be banned due to questions regarding structural integrity, or, and this is a favourite in recent times, against the spirit of the sport. And this is a genuine possibility. I remember all of the kerfuffle that was manifested after Aston Martin brought a rear wing upgrade, which deliberately created outwash, and therefore made it really difficult for anyone to get past them. I think it was either nerfed or relatively banned, but it set a precedent, which then resulted in the F1 cars becoming impossible to be able to overtake. Aston started it. You could even lump McLaren's mini DRS technique into the equation as well as another example, and it just leads to that situation where everyone at the beginning of this trend are just looking at things and are shocked that they didn't come up with it, and are going, that can't be legal, can it? And therefore the FA will have to take a look at it. But the timing of the ban will make it really, really fun, because usually these bans tend to go, yeah, okay, you can use it for this weekend, but not next weekend, or else we'll have to take another look at it. But I think maybe the FIA might be quick to really nip things in the bud for the fear of cars becoming harder to overtake, because that's been a real bugbear. That was a main mission of the last regulation piece, and it failed miserably. I don't think that Formula One wants it to happen again. It'll be fun for the fans watching the teams having to scramble and come up with another plan on the fly, but for the engineers, it'll be the complete opposite of that. All that work and it ends up in the bin or completely destroyed into oblivion and a complete shell of its former self. 13. Two teams get hit with post-race penalties for misinterpretation of the rules regarding the new changes before we get to Europe. So this one is kind of similar, but different in a way. Instead of this being found out in practice before qualifying and active competition takes place, this is found out after the race, when something a little bit fishy is revealed either by the world feed, the telemetry, or something that the FIA and Joe Bauer find in post-race scrutineering, that they'll just go, wait a minute, that's not right. Shenanigans! And I'm predicting two teams here because it will really show there's been a systemic issue going on here. Come on, one team? That's a little bit easy. Two? That certainly makes it more fun. It'll imply that the rulebook has created traps which have allowed the teams to end up with technically illegal situations for something that they thought was perfectly fine, that they guessed wrong, and will be just going, honest mistake, gov. And if one of those penalties flip a big result, that becomes a bit of a mini scandal. And then you get a cascade of technical directives being written afterward. And again, you'll get teams looking at the guilty parties and saying, would you look at that? That's against the spirit of the sport. Blah, 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 blah. And we all remember what happened after Technical Directive 38 that Mercedes were pushing for, thinking it would actually turn the tide in their favour again. It didn't. And then going in a similar vein of 14 is that two team principals are fired before the end of the year. Going into a brand new regulation cycle, it's a great opportunity for teams to go up the order, but it's an opportunity for teams to go down the order. And what do investors in the boardroom do when they see that kind of thing? They panic! Therefore, cut the head off and all will be fine. Because if a big team guesses wrong, things end up ramping up fast. Especially if another team nails the regs and starts making them look silly on Sunday. Or if a long-time frontrunner descends into the midfield. The new era has unsettled many teams already, and even though they made public vows to not look around them, I can imagine they have been looking around. I don't want to really be naming names right now, it's too early to say, but based on the fact that Fred's been actually very vocal saying, it doesn't really matter if the one will be done, it's just about the long-term grind, I can imagine there's a lot of pressure on Fred, because Ferrari doesn't want to be seen as a bunch of saps, and then potentially not winning a race for a second season in a row. But then realistically, Alpine Steve Nielsen could be a factor and a casualty because, well, there could be certain other parties coming in who might want to put in somebody else, you know, Christian Horner. And then finally, at least one team that didn't win a race last year would be a genuine championship contender, meaning a change of the guard. And by changing of the guard, I am meaning Mercedes, McLaren, Red Bull, and Ferrari. And you could easily be a little bit of a smartass and say, "Oh, well, Ferrari didn't win a race this year, so do they count?" No, so stop it. I count them as part of the frontrunners. But yes, this is the kind of prediction that really suits the incoming season because, well, we don't know who's going to be at the top and who's going to be at the bottom. It's completely up in the laps of the gods, or technically the FIA and Pirelli, since they do know the data. It'll all be about who understood the brief the best, instead of thinking, well, they had the best car last year, so therefore they're going to be good. It's completely different. Last year's car is museum fodder. I really do think one of the kings of F1 right now, the top four, will be in the midfield by the end of 2026, and having to really dig their teeth in to get right back up there again in 2027, or risk falling into the doldrums for the rest of this decade. And again, I think that Williams and Aston Martin are the prime candidates to be a couple of really handy-dandy kingslayers. And who is going to be slain? Well, we all think it's going to be Ferrari based on the doom and gloom from there, but it could be anybody. It could be McLaren, and that uncertainty is what makes videos like this, and next season in general, really good fun. So yeah, these are my selections for 2026, and actually, I'm going to be doing a video next week based on what you are predicting. I've done a community post, I'll leave a link to it in the pinned comment. You can go and put yours out there, and the most liked comments will be then considered, and the top 15 will be in the video, so subscribe to find out if yours got selected. So whilst you're making your decision for your prediction to be consider this video here as some little background noise to help you think. I'll see you over there.